If you're a pastor or ministry leader, you might be thinking about the future of the church and how fast paced changes in culture and technology are causing us to reimagine some of the ways that we do church. We are living in a time of unprecedented change, but often that change is met by a strong resistance to change. This morning, I'd like to share with you a story about a once invincible company called the Kodak Company. If you're like me, you might have a Kodak product somewhere in your home, whether it's a vintage camera or a picture that was printed on a Kodak film or taken by a Kodak camera. Some of us grew up taking pictures on film technology, and Kodak was a household name at the time. In fact, in the 1960s and 70s, the Kodak company was a tech giant that controlled almost every dimension of the image making process. In those years, Kodak produced not only the cameras and the film products, but also the developing products, the flashlight bulbs, and even the solutions that allowed for people to develop these products in dark rooms. In other words, they controlled the film developing process from beginning to end and made millions and millions of dollars. And they seemed to be a company that could not fail. But a decisive moment happened in 1975 when a young man, 24 years old, by the name of Steven Sasson, he came to his employers because he had developed a new technology. Steven Sasson invented the first crude digital camera. Now, this camera, as you can see here, was the first digital recording device for pictures. And he presented this to his employers, and he showed them that he could, in fact, record an image on a piece of cassette tape. And he knew that it wasn't a finished product, but he was sharing with them a vision for the future. Unfortunately, this device required an external device for them to be able to see the images, and his employers could never envision that consumers would ever want to see their images projected on an external device. Well, they didn't like the product, but they allowed him to continue to pursue this idea. And a few years later, in 1989, Steven Sasson and Robert Hills presented to their employers a quote-unquote finished product. It was a consumer-ready digital camera that looked a lot like our current digital cameras, with some of the same functionalities that our digital cameras have. And he presented it to his employers. And again, another decisive moment in the history of that company. His employers feared that if they released this camera to the public, that all of the other film developing products that they were created, in other words, the things that they built their success upon in the past, they feared that it would cannibalize the sales on some of the things that they were used to building their success as a company. Well, they shelved the product, and unfortunately, as history would have it, that same year, the Fuji company released a similar product that was based and using the same patents that the Kodak company had developed in digital camera technology. They released the first camera, and other companies did too, and eventually they began a revolution. As you know, practically every picture that we take these days is taken by a digital camera. As history would have it, as we see by this graph, we see that the growth of analog peaked around the year 2000. But by that time, digital technologies had overtaken analog technologies. And eventually, as fate would have it, in the year 2012, the Kodak company had to file for bankruptcy because they could not keep up with the advancements in technology. Now think about that. What a tragedy that a tech giant was not able to adjust appropriately enough to the changes in culture and society, to the point that they were the ones who actually developed the first digital camera, but they were not willing to make the necessary changes to embrace the future of their digital technology that they had created. This is a cautionary tale, and I believe that we need to ask the question, how is it possible that this tech giant couldn't adapt to the future? I believe it was because the Kodak company became a victim of their own past success. The Kodak company forgot who they were. They thought that they were a company to create film products, and that's what they were tied to. But actually, the Kodak company's true essence was that they existed to help people create images regardless of the products or the ways that those images were created. And eventually, because they forgot who they were, they had to file for bankruptcy. I wonder if there's a lesson here for us in church leadership. And as we think about the future of the church, I wonder if we could think through some of the ways that we have been victims to past success. I wonder what are some of the questions that we could be asking ourselves or with our ministry leaders. How can we remain true to the essence of who we are as a community of believers? How can we remain true to the essence of what it means to be a follower of Christ and a disciple-making a community of believers, and embrace new ways of doing ministry, embrace new technologies? We are existing in a time and place where we're connecting with others digitally and through social media and through more immediacy of the digital connectivity that exists out there. How can we embrace some of those technologies so that the essence of who we are as a community of believers is enhanced by some of these technological developments or some of these new ways of doing church? What are some of the conversations that we can be having with our ministry leaders about who we are? What is the essence of who we are as individual churches? And how can we use existing technologies and developing technologies to improve some of the ways that we are connecting with each other and with the world, and how we can be sharing the gospel in a way that remains true to who we are and yet mindful of some of the changes in culture and society?